This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In every corner of the world, people celebrate English tradition and values as members of the Royal Society of St George. Yet here in England, branches are closing as membership dwindles.
I feel that in this country, St George is all but dead and buried.
Until recently, Stephen Warden from Wigston was president of the Leicestershire branch. Despite spending £1,500 of his own money advertising, he couldn't find enough members to keep it running.
I did everything humanly possible to get new members into the branch from the local environment, but they were just not interested in joining.
He thinks changing demographics and declining interest in the society's values contributed to disappearing membership. But he also blames political leadership at national and local levels. Stephen claims his proposal for a St George's Day parade was repeatedly rejected by Leicester City Council over 10 years. A celebration is planned for St George's Day, but like most cities and towns, no parade will pass through the streets. A Leicester City Council spokesperson said, "Leicester's annual celebrations of St George's Day have been organised and funded by the City Council for many decades, and they remain an important part of the city's festival calendar." Some in Leicester say they would like to see more done to celebrate England's patron saint.
I think it's a sign of patriotism. I think it helps the country. We celebrate a lot of religious festivals here.
People forget, I think, what is important to England.
Maybe it's been sort of jumped onto with the wrong crowd, but I think nowadays it's just completely different.
Back in Wigston, St George's Cross flies above Stephen's home.
It makes me feel good because I know at least I've not forgotten St George if everybody else has.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday at midnight on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Headliners is coming right up, but first our top stories this evening. And we start with some breaking news. The Home Office can only locate 38% of migrants currently approved for deportation to Rwanda. Now, according to a government report released earlier today, only 2,143 of the 5,700 migrants that Rwanda had agreed to accept can be found for detention. All had been told that their asylum claims were inadmissible, but more than half have now stopped reporting to the Home Office. Comes after Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said he expected the first flights to Kigali to take off in 10 to 12 weeks. Well, maybe they're in Ireland, because Ireland's Department of Justice is standing by claims that 80% of asylum seekers are coming into the country through Northern Ireland. It comes after refugee organisations questioned that figure, released by the country's Minister for Justice. Ireland's Deputy Premier, Micheál Martin, has said it was not based on evidence, statistics or data. However, Britain's Northern Ireland Minister said the UK's new Rwanda deterrent is clearly working.
It was always going to be the case. We believed as a government that our Rwanda policy would act as a deterrent for people coming to this country illegally. I think we are slightly surprised that it's manifested itself so quickly after the Act became law, and we are now in the process of making sure that we are gathering those individuals who could qualify for the first flight to beyond that first flight.
The SNP is preparing for a leadership contest after the Scottish First Minister announced his resignation earlier. Humza Yousaf's admitted that he underestimated the level of upset that he would cause by cutting political ties with the Greens. He'll now continue in his post until a replacement can be found. Clearly emotional, Mr Yousaf said he's quitting to help repair relationships across the political divide.
I bear no ill will and certainly bear no grudge against anyone. Politics can be a brutal business. It takes its toll on your physical and mental health. Your family suffer alongside you. I am in absolute debt to my wonderful wife, my beautiful children, and my wider family for putting up with me over the years. I'm afraid you'll be seeing a lot more of me from now.
And finally, in the United States, multiple police officers have been shot in Charlotte, North Carolina. The local police department has issued a statement saying that the shooting began as officers from the US Marshals Task Force were carrying out an investigation. The scene is being described as still active. They're urging local residents to remain indoors. Local media are reporting that at least one officer has been killed. Multiple victims have been transported to hospital, we're told. Right, for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, over to our headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners on this glorious Monday evening. Your first look at Tuesday's front pages, all adorned with front pages to treasure and keep in an almanac. I am Simon Evans. Joining me tonight, two comedians, Cressida Wetton and Nick Dixon, who I'm sure are feeling every bit as upbeat about the future of the British Isles as I am tonight. Nick, you look sort of slightly ambivalent, possibly.
Yeah, loving life. Hums is gone, so I'm happy. I'm so happy.
Yeah, exactly. That's all we need to worry about at this point, isn't it? God knows what sort of power vacuum has been created up there. But nothing that couldn't be filled with a small chemical explosion. Anyway, let's have a look at those front pages. Daily Mail, all schools warned on sextortion epidemic. Well, there's Humza at the top there to remind us of the real story. Telegraph, sex is a biological fact, NHS declares. Wow, what a world. Guardian, Yousaf quits as First Minister after coalition gamble triggers SNP crisis. iNews, PIP disability benefit could be cut using new system with 6 tiers. And finally, the Daily Star, creepy Jez, I'll kill 18 billion slugs. Well, those were your front pages. So, kicking off the in-depth look into Tuesday's front pages with the Metro, Cressida.
The Metro, you've only got Yousaf to blame. See what they did
Cunning.
there? Cunning. SNP crisis as leader quits in tears. I don't know if you've watched the footage. I imagine you have. But
I've watched the 30 seconds. I haven't managed to see the whole thing.
Well, the tears are they're a high standard of politicians' tears. We're used to Sturgeon's. Hancock had a go a while ago.
Theresa
May, that single word.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Very good standard of tears.
Country I love. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. I watched the whole 8.5 minutes, whatever it was. Yeah, should he really be crying, though, on a public platform like that as a man?
As a man, no. And also as an utter failure and, just like not somebody who I think really represented what the SNP is supposed to be about, the dream of Scottish independence, pride, nobility. Instead, he's been entangled in really quite petty little disputes of one kind or another, ridiculous identity politics. It's all been just a horrible farrago, isn't it?
Yeah, but he has got a lot to cry about in that sense, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Although I should say, a woman shouldn't either in that context. Thatcher did once, but because she was so stoical the rest of the time, you did sort of respect it. As a general rule, no politician in that position should cry. That's my
Well, we could get to the should men cry debate and we could have that for hours. But as a politician, I don't think it's a great look, personally. But
it depends what circumstances you're resigning under or whether, did you reach for the stars and fall? Just go beyond your centre of gravity. 7 reference. Yeah. or was it just like this kind of tangled?
Yeah. Well, on that, the first achievement he listed was just his race. He thought it was a great achievement. Very strange to me. I think people are kind of over this race stuff.
And that isn't his achievement, I'm sorry. That is the achievement of the Scottish people who looked beyond his race in order to accept him and to elect him. That is an achievement, but not his.
But then he listed all the current crop of leaders we have in the UK, who are all bad, as some sort of validation of multiculturalism, which is a complete non sequitur. I mean, even if they are good, that's got nothing to do with multiculturalism. You could say it had something to do with assimilation. Multiculturalism is just autonomous cultures retaining their features in their adopted nation. And if they're bad, then it's even worse. I don't understand what that had to do with anything. And I think people are generally sick of this racial stuff. He famously did the white speech. I think people, that's not the reason he went, of course, which was the coalition with the Greens and a massive misjudgment. But I think people are generally sick of that kind of race politics.
Couldn't agree more.
Absolutely. I think the white speech didn't do him any favours.
No,
it was interesting how it resurged, if that is a word, is it, as a resurgence?
Resurfaced.
Does it resurface?
They always resurface,
it resurfaced. Because of his own hate speech law, because of his own introduction of that, everyone shared that video. I don't think it's why he went, but I wonder whether it added to the feeling the Greens wanted to detach them, disassociate themselves.
I'd like to think so. They probably loved it. I mean, the unfortunate thing is the Labour leader now has the almost exact same speech, like he's been cloned. Have you seen it? He's done exactly the same speech. Anas Sawa, that's his name, isn't it? Scottish Labour.
Oh, yes, right. Yeah,
and so it's out of the frying pan into the other idiot, as the phrase goes. I had to tone down when I said online, but because we got up at 5 a.m.
Moving on to the Telegraph, Nick, they got a different story.
Yes. Sorry, I feel I took over during that one.
There's been a major breakthrough in the field of biological facts.
Yes, sex is a biological fact, NHS declares. I know this comes as news to you, Simon, but listen up, Buster, because sex is real. So the Constitution, updated every 10 years, so, you know, that's probably why they've lagged behind a bit, has now been updated, because in 2021, you could still be placed in a single-sex ward with someone who was pretending to be that sex because they identified as such.
Right.
But now you can't because they've changed it. And which is a great thing, although some NHS leaders have raised concerns that the health service was being dragged into a pre-election culture wars debate. I love that. You just stick in the phrase culture wars when you don't want anything normal to happen.
Very similar to an interview that was going around recently. Caroline Noakes, the Tory, like a rhino Tory, who was caught about a year ago scolding an LBC talk show host, I believe, about, you know, his what is a woman, kind of, you know, that line of questioning, you know, and how, in what sense is a trans woman a woman? And she just kept going on and on and on about how unnecessarily toxic the debate is. This is such
the gaslighting line isn't it? From the O'Brien class.
Stop forcing me to actually make sense. That's so toxic.
Absolutely. I think those days are behind us. And this is going to help us with the next mad thing, isn't it? Because people are going to remember this. You know, you can't just have activists calling the shots and not come up with some common sense.
Absolutely.
I'd love to think you're right, Cressida, but I think the next thing will just come up and catch people off guard again. We had COVID, you know, wokeness, BLM, every new one catches people off guard. I'm worried the new one is going to be euthanasia, and we'll all be told it's terribly caring, and if you don't go along with it, you're evil.
Well, it'll be interesting. Everyone was extremely hostile to Matthew Paris when he...
that's true, but his article was
so I think that's a while. But I know, I mean, it was only about 3 months into COVID, wasn't it, that Black Lives Matter? I mean, that was George Floyd, obviously a specific incident, but, you know, that really, everyone thought identity politics was going to be killed by a massive worldwide pandemic. Instead,
it trumps it.
It fueled it. It's extraordinary. Anyway, sex is a biological fact, the NHS declares, whereas the Times have something on Plato, which somehow feels like a kind of direct j'accuse.
They don't want to get into anything toxic.
They do. They're mainly going the SNP. SNP lurches into another crisis as leader quits, but they've also got Scroll reveals Plato's final musings. Why is that flautist so bad? So apparently they found a scroll and a lady was playing the flute for him, and he didn't think she was very good.
This has been discovered in Pompeii, or no, not Pompeii. That was Roman, wasn't it, rather than Greek?
Well, she was a Thracian slave girl. Yeah. She was Thracian, which is like
he looked up
North
Thracian before
Turkey,
he came. Yes,
North Greece, but it's also could be Romania and Bulgaria.
Have you got your maps out? You can get those books, can't you, with Plato with the maps in? They're the high-end.
I'm just a fan of Thracian slave girls, so I knew already.
Thracian,
yeah, I know what I'm saying. I know in the North we say it differently. That's my get-out clause. I love that, but he wasn't worried that she was a slave girl being forced to play the flute. He was just like, why is she so rubbish?
But
there were different times.
He was he just died of natural causes, right, Plato? Because Socrates, of course, famously took poison surrounded by his fellow philosophers, and it's very movingly accounted.
Hemlock. No, it was the flute playing.
It was what done for him.
But he was also 80 or 81.
It sounds like, wasn't there the famous last words of somebody?
That's like 1,000.
Either that wallpaper goes or I do. Who was that?
That was Socrates.
Was it?
Yeah.
I think it might have been Oscar Wilde. I can't be sure.
They've also got a story. Over half of migrants...
Oh, no, it was Napoleon, wasn't it? Because he is thought to have been poisoned by arsenic in the...
We don't need to be here.
Sorry. Sorry, carry on.
Well, some migrants have
Carry on, Cressida, sorry.
Some migrants have gone missing. Is anyone surprised? The Home Office has lost contact with a bunch of people it was going to send to Rwanda.
Hopefully they're in Ireland by now. And ending this section with the Daily Star, Nick.
Yes, glad we got this in. Creepy Jez, I'll kill 18 billion slugs. And the Daily Star's Hug a Slug campaign isn't going as well as we had hoped. Who'd have thought Hug a Slug would have gone wrong? Because old Jez, which is Jeremy Clarkson, of course, they're after his barley, and he's not having any of it, so he's going to commit a kind of slug genocide.
Fantastic. I mean, it's interesting that they've kind of pitched Jez against the slugs. They're obviously trying to imply a certain kind of equivalence, aren't they? The way the photo is taken there as well.
But that's not too bad.
Jeremy Clarkson is looking
if
pretty
you're equivalent
slug-like.
to 18 billion of anything, that's not too bad, is it?
I've talked quite recently about sorting my slugs, which is not a good way to go. It is satisfying to watch the slugs curl up. But
no.
There were loads of them making their way across our lawn like some great military manoeuvres. It was horrible.
Oh, are you supposed to bake eggshells and then crush them up? And that's and they go, oh, that's a bit sharp, and then
but it also kills your lawn. That's the trouble. If I had my time again, I'd get the air rifle.
One slug at a time.
Time-consuming, but satisfying.
Eggshells, that's the way. Bake the eggshells, crush them
have
up.
nighttime lighting on them.
Or just live in London, and then you won't have a garden.
No, that's
Well,
true.
that's
Should have
true.
done that, yeah.
True.
OK, that's the front pages. In part two, we have the meat from the middle, SNP hopefuls, Irish sea shenanigans and hopes for a ceasefire in Gaza. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
We're now going to talk about Meghan and Harry. There was a polo match they took part in Miami, and we've got Angela Evan, royal correspondent here. So, what have you picked up from this this polo match?
Well, the interesting thing is that the polo thing that's going to be photographed and filmed for Netflix, this is Harry's one.
Yes.
But there was Meghan centre stage. And she stood there with holding the treasurer.
Yes.
And actually, who she pushed around was a doctor, Dr. Sophie Chankuka, who's chair of Santabile, the charity that they're doing it for. And she was asked if she would take the trophy. And she said, yes, that's why she came, because the money from the polo match is going to this charity.
Huh.
And Meghan had to push her out the way because she wanted to be in the middle. I've never heard such a disgusting, rude thing to do.
That at the end of the day, she's an actress. She knows how to take centre stage.
Yes, but this was bullying. You know,
Actual physical pushed her.
No, she didn't actually physically push her, but she wanted to go next to Harry because it was her charity. And so she bent down under the trophy and then went the other side of Meghan, and then she's all smiling. I mean, that turns my stomach, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody would know that that's not appropriate. Let Harry have a little thing of his own. He scored the goal that made them win. And you'd think she would be really pleased. He pecked his lips, he pecked her lips. It wasn't actually a great passionate kiss, as the paper said, because it didn't last more than a second. You know, it's just crushed him to nothing.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, with Cressida Wetton and Nick Dixon in the box. So let's have a look at the Telegraph first, Cressida, on who is going to be the Rishi to Humza's truss.
John Swinney, SNP leadership favourite, backed transgender self-ID at 16 and an LGBT curriculum. So this is the guy who's... Well, he hasn't said no. They're saying in here that he's suggested he will run. It's not quite what happened. They stuck a microphone in his face and said, will you? And he said, I couldn't possibly say. So, yeah, it looks likely. But anyway, he has supported all these things in the past that we're not very keen on here.
Yeah.
For example...
And that have not proved to be great news for the SNP generally.
Well, no, exactly. So whether he'll have to...
Third time lucky.
I don't know whether he's going to have to change his mind and suddenly... decide he's not into net zero or self-ID or whatever. But currently, that's what's on his CV.
What's the famous saying about insanity, doing the same thing, expecting the results to change, you know? But I suppose with politics, sometimes the wind does change direction. But if anything, the wind has decisively moved against the SNP since they kind of... Oh, dear. What is wrong with them?
Well, he's an SNP career man, this guy. He joined them at 15, so imagine how many weird views you end up having or having to take. I mean, yeah, he's still favourite, though. I'm not sure. I mean, he's a bit... But you never really trust the front-runner, do you? At least when in the Tory elections, you don't. I've heard that Jenny Gilruth is an outside bet. She's currently 4th in the poll I saw. Right. Kate Forbes is 2nd, and Neil Gray... I was going to say, Kate Forbes,
who was, like, neck and neck with Holmes initially, and she was too Presbyterian or something for them, wasn't she?
They say she's too Christian. Although, actually, she does well with Muslims, really, because they like that she's just open about her faith. Yeah. And obviously, she's somewhat conservative on certain social issues, so they tend to prefer that. Yeah. Whereas Swinney, don't think they'll like. Yeah, Gilruth's doing well. Forbes, apparently, it's just not the right time for her. So I've heard, but who knows? You hear these
Also, hasn't this guy, he stepped in for 10 minutes before, so he's...
Yeah.
He knows...
Bit of experience.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I kind of feel like they probably need an Englishman to go up there and run it for them, don't they? Get them back on track.
He wants to go back in the EU, which I always thought was the most perverse position, independence, but in the EU. It's nonsense.
Well...
You're all right.
A Scotsman once said to me, almost confidentially, and I don't... Maybe this will be a controversial thing to say out loud, but he said, this isn't the thing that they like to say out loud. I may have said it out loud on this show before. Scots don't like to admit it in so many words, but the thing about the EU is freedom of movement is good for Scots because most Scots who have any promise at all leave Scotland immediately and go to London.
Wow.
But any Bulgarians and Romanians who have promise might go to Glasgow or Edinburgh. And you can sort of see their point. They experience a permanent brain drain. Okay. And within the context of freedom of movement, they can be replenished from countries that are more economically challenged than Scotland is. But if you grow up in Scotland and you have ambition, you tend to fulfil it south of the border. And it's very sad, and I do feel a certain amount of sympathy for that.
I already thought that was offensive, and you hadn't said the offensive bit. Actually, at that point, we're going to get so many emails.
It's the Bulgarians I feel sorry for. Anyway, staying with the Telegraph, Rishi Sunak is not interested in the return of damaged goods.
Indeed, Britain not in business of taking more migrants, warns Mel Stride. So, of course, Ireland are trying to send them back, so to speak. But it's not going to happen, according to Mel Stride. So, obviously, the deterrent is working because all these migrants went off to Ireland because they were worried about the Rwanda policy. Now, Ireland wants to call Britain, via a loophole, a safe third country in order to send them back. But I think we can quite easily prove we're not a safe country. Just go on Twitter. You know what I mean? That's an easy one.
That's not what they mean, is it? They mean not safe because you might get sent on. It's not a safe place to be trusted.
Oh, OK, never mind. My joke doesn't work.
But I do find this very hard.
It's a horrifically safe place for people of MENA heritage, isn't it, at the moment? Certainly London is on a Saturday afternoon.
What's MENA?
Middle East, North Africa.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah. There's a new one for you. Jot that down.
Do you really think that Rwanda has been so successful in its in how people know about it that it's making this difference already?
No, absolutely not. No, but I suppose, like, bureaucratically, it might be.
No, but they are allegedly going to Ireland, aren't they? Why that part's true?
They
because
are
of
going,
Rwanda,
but I'm
not just because they've heard that it's better.
Right.
It's a bit of a coincidence, doesn't it? It's been better for ages.
Yeah.
No, I'm not sure if it's better or not.
Hey,
But
you might
yeah.
be right, yeah.
But because since Brexit, there's no clear rule about it, so they need to make a new law. There's no clear rule about it, so Ireland's trying to bring in this law. We can send them to the UK. We're trying to counter it. We don't want to take... It would be pointless to suddenly bring all the people back, wouldn't it?
Also, it's called an emergency law. How quickly are they going to make it a
Right.
law?
Yeah.
Anything that's called an emergency, I think, we'll be talking about this for the next 18 months.
You too. Ireland just needs their own Rwanda law and send them on again somewhere
Great
else.
idea. There were some other
Rwanda or
countries that
somewhere
were
else.
running.
Atlantis.
Nice, yeah.
They could have just a massive platform, about 30 miles out into the Atlantic, couldn't they?
They could.
Yeah.
You're full of ideas tonight.
I think it's quite... I mean, there's going to be some creativity shown in this issue soon. Cressida, The Times, and it sounds like a crack of light in the relentless gloom from Palestine.
Cameron urges Hamas to accept very generous ceasefire offer. So, Hamas have been offered a 40-day ceasefire, and this could include the release of thousands of Palestinian prisoners. It's not definite. And, of course, everyone's urging them to take this. But, they haven't taken it so far, have they? So
No. Well, I mean, I find it quite... the whole thing with the hostages was, and the whole thing on October the 7th, it was obviously so horrific and shocking that the question of what exactly did the Hamas, the terrorists, hope to achieve was rarely really examined, was it? And the existence of these thousands of Palestinian prisoners has not been discussed very often.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? If this is presumably what they were thinking they wanted to secure by taking hostages... Is that the implication?
Are many of them not since October 7th?
No, I don't think so. I think they've been imprisoned for quite some time, and many of them for perfectly valid reasons.
Yeah, Josh would say that's a very...
But this is the thing that doesn't get discussed very often. In my experience, I may have just been reading the wrong...
I think they're promising a 40-day truce, Israel. I'd be a little bit worried what they're going to do after that 40 days. Maybe they're saving up like a really big bomb. But it is fairly generous. I understand what Cameron means, because they're talking about 33. They would potentially accept 33 hostages in exchange for thousands. Yeah. So to the layman, that does seem quite a reasonable deal. It looks like it could actually happen, because let's face it, this war's not going anywhere. Nothing's going to change. You can't win it.
No.
They're saying, and people are admitting they're not close to a two-state solution, as we know. So all that's going to happen is you may as well have this ceasefire. It sounds like it might actually happen. Egypt are in favour of it. I think so. I think it's actual progress.
And if let's say they released all those hostages, and they did exchange them, and we accepted the exchange rate or whatever, the international community thought that was fair, and they got them all home. And then Israel continued trying to wipe out Hamas. The international community then would just have none of that.
Right.
Well,
it's already been, don't you think, a net loss for Israel
in
terms of the international community and in terms of their power? Because Iran, I know people said that was done for show, but would Iran have attacked so brazenly in the past? I'm not sure. So it's been a net loss for Israel, unfortunately.
But that was one of the questions, was whether the Hamas puppeteers in Iran had calculated that, for instance, the mood, the sentiment in young people in particular, in the West, in America, because I don't think we would previously have seen quite such unilateral support for Palestine and describing it as a genocide and so on 10 years ago.
No, definitely not.
I remember people used to wear the wristbands, and it was kind of the cool opinion to have. But
we
weren't. I don't think people knew about it.
Yeah, but Lord Cameron didn't have that opinion.
No, exactly. Lord Cameron of Chipping Norton. Jezza, the slug basher, will be furious about that. Should have been his. Agriculture news in The Guardian now, Nick, talking of the slug basher and the wettest 18 months on record. It does feel like the wrong sort of climate change.
Yeah, it's washed-out winter spells, price rises for UK shoppers with key crops down by a fifth, and it's going to affect bread, beer and biscuits. The Simon Evans story. It's a good name, isn't it? Bread, beer and biscuits. It's got a kind of Angela's Ashes kind of vibe, or maybe an album in the 80s.
Bread and circuses, a little bit New Labour.
Beer and biscuit. My story. Yeah, it's... anyway, the reason is the fields are waterlogged, they can't be planted, tractors can't apply fertilizers, so this is all going to impact the cost of all these things. I mean, if you're gluten intolerant, you're fine, but otherwise it is a bit of an issue.
Well, it's interesting you raise that, because I was aware of this. We went actually to stay with some friends who ran a farm right up north over Easter, and his fields were still underwater, and he explained to us this is going to be, you know, half the country's harvest is going to be affected. I was thinking, I don't eat bread. So is that bad for me? Because that means everyone else. But, of course, that means everyone else will be moving on to my turf.
I noticed you don't mention the beer.
Yeah.
See, I don't drink beer, so between us, if Cressida doesn't have biscuits, then I'm absolutely fine.
I couldn't remember what the
Don't worry about that, Nick.
Yeah.
I think it's bizarre, though, that The Guardian are like climbing into bed with the farmers and going, oh, we're the defenders of the farmers in this article. Because 5 minutes ago, we were having farmers' protests because they were being told what to do with their land, and they had to fill it with... Well, it was the Welsh farmers, wasn't it? Something like 10% of their land had to go to tree growing or something.
All right.
So, I don't know, just coming from The Guardian, I mean, they're pushing climate change, aren't they?
Well, we're certainly going to be short of cereal crops, and we are going to be importing stuff. But I suppose another big question is whether or not... I don't even know where we're at with Ukraine at the moment. I mean, Ukraine was traditionally the bread basket of Europe, isn't it? But I don't suppose that's had a terrific... harvest in prospect. I don't know, has it been affected?
The grain supplies have been... the prices have gone way up because of the war, absolutely.
One way or another, it's a good time to go fully carnivore, I reckon.
Yes.
Full keto.
Like Lewis is here.
Staying with The Guardian now, Cressida, what looks to me like an utterly redundant and tiresome portmanteau neologism for the crime of blackmail.
Wow.
Teachers warned to be on lookout for victims of sextortion in UK schools. This is horrible. This is so sad. So sextortion is when somebody either gets you to send them real compromising material or just makes it up. You know, we're always having stories about AI, faux porn and stuff, that kind of thing. And so it's something that teachers and parents have to look out for, because it's young boys are particularly susceptible to this.
Susceptible to being duped by it?
Yes, they're very vulnerable targets. And what the people want, these are typically people coming from Africa. It's basically catfishing on another level. It's about getting money out of people.
Yeah.
But the problem is, if you do it to a 16-year-old boy, there's a good chance he won't know what to do, and there have been lots of cases of suicide.
God. So they send me a picture of yourself?
I think so. I think so.
And then they threaten to release that to...
Exactly. We're going to send this to all the contacts in your phone, and the parents in this article are trying to raise awareness of this because they lost their 16-year-old son to suicide.
Yeah, horrible. It's actually happened to a lad who works on my podcast. They created a picture where it's his face next to a mock picture of another part, and then they send that. You know, say if you don't pay us, we'll send that around. He obviously didn't pay. They actually did send it. It suddenly appeared on all his contacts list, like his brother's friend, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So it's a real thing. And the fact that, as you say, it affects male victims between 14 and 18. Another horrible thing for young boys.
Yeah, I hadn't realised that. So that's kind of weird, isn't it? Because you would think boys of that age just kind of, I don't know, goofily... I don't know. I don't picture them having the shame, but they do.
At that age, I mean, that's when you're really vulnerable. You've got no sense of how you could get over things.
I remember there was a photo. I went on a sort of scout camp once when I was about 17 and got absolutely blind drunk, passed out outside the house. We were staying in a sort of, hut, face down in the leaves, and a photograph circulated of me, and my trousers were lowered because I'd been, relieving myself, and I don't know whether I'd tripped and fallen over. But anyway, this photograph went round. It was pretty horrendous, and...
But am I right in saying that in those days...
It was a genuine photograph.
No offence.
Yeah, the one I'm talking about was a fake, but that was real.
Yeah, this was real, yeah. And it wasn't of my tone. It was just like, a bit of bare cheek in the moonlight.
I would hazard a guess that they had to photocopy them individually, whereas the point is this is happening on the internet.
I'm going to need therapy.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, it's terrible. I'm not suppose there's any of them watching, but I would honestly say just tough it out, though. That's the way to do it, isn't it?
So they want the teachers and the parents to have these conversations ahead of time, because if it happens to the kid and they feel isolated, that's when the worst can happen.
And if anyone shares that sort of thing with you, you've got to just immediately cancel it.
Yeah, because they're talking about tech safeguarding. It's actually the persuasion element more than the tech itself. It's the tricking of it,
We are halfway through the show. In part 3, AstraZeneca revelations, sick note culture, or is it blue notes? And the top destinations for Amnesty students. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Good evening to you. Tomorrow, more wet weather to come in parts of the west, whereas in the east, it'll start to feel fairly warm in the late April sunshine. Low pressure is still dominating, but it's kind of slow moving, and it's in these western areas where we've seen outbreaks of rain today that we will again see them tomorrow. Staying fairly damp overnight across South Wales, southwest England. The rain easing a little across parts of Scotland. The heavy showers also easing in Northern Ireland, at least for a time. Staying largely clear across East Anglia and the southeast. Temperature-wise, a bit warmer than recent nights. Most urban areas, at least, staying up at 7 to 10 degrees Celsius. On to Tuesday, and as I said, it's a bit of an east-west split. We'll start with a lot of cloud across northern England, but I'm hopeful it'll brighten up here. There will be further rain for Wales and Northern Ireland, some heavy rain as well, the yellows and the reds in there, and it's also fairly wet for parts of southwest England. Pretty gusty in these western areas as well. A few showers in western Scotland, but a good part of Scotland dry. Much of northern England, the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast having a fine old day, and it will feel a bit warmer as well. Look at those temperatures, 17, 18, maybe even 19 Celsius, but still on the cool side where we've got the cloud and the breeze and the outbreaks of rain further west from that area of low pressure. That does pull away, allowing some warmer weather to move in over the next few days, but it is not going to be dry everywhere. There will still be some heavy rain around.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online. This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliner. So we have the Daily Mail now, Nick, and finally all your most dissident views on vaccine mandates can be unleashed.
Hate to say I was proved right, but AstraZeneca admits for first time its COVID vaccine can cause rare side effect, intense legal fight with victims of defective jab. And it's a shocker. Basically, there's going to be cases worth up to 20 million in compensation. And guess who's going to pay? It's Johnny taxpayer. Because, of course, you release a questionable jab, you get legal immunity from the government, it then harms people, and then, lo and behold, we have to pay, even though their revenue exceeds 10 billion in the first quarter of 2024, a rise of 19%. We don't know how much is profit, but you can imagine probably quite a lot.
AstraZeneca, I seem to remember they actually released the vaccine as a non-profit enterprise, didn't they? But I imagine their share price...
But I'm saying they've probably got enough money to tackle some of these legal fees, rather than us. I don't have the money to tackle it. And I didn't get it, and I was against it. Why do I have to pay for it?
Well, fair enough. I mean, devil's advocate, I suppose you might say, as taxpayers, the vaccine rollout, at least as we understood it at the time, saved the country millions because of furlough schemes that were costing us vastly more than that at the time. So on balance, it was probably...
I would happily have had
This is obviously not what is important to these people who...
Yeah, but if we just didn't have lockdown, and none of that would have...
Well, I agree with you. I agree with you.
But this is all getting the conversation going, isn't it? Because up until recently, we just haven't been allowed to discuss this at all.
No.
And now Andrew Bridgen's making progress, and the conversation's starting to happen because the truth never sleeps. I mean, I don't know. It's
still very heated, isn't it, in America? There was a big row. Jordan Peterson had one on his podcast with that young chap called Destiny. Yeah, which is quite odd.
Cites weird information from Wikipedia.
Yeah, but with quite a plausible sort of tone of voice.
Yeah, speaks quickly.
I don't understand how he's got where he is just called Destiny. That used to be a pickup artist called that.
I know.
Anyway, but yeah, I mean, it's the moral case. I think it's still probably so few cases that you would still say, on balance, it was a good thing for the nation, not lockdown, but vaccines. Yeah. But that's different from requiring people to take.
We wouldn't say that.
I feel that the cost was just unbelievable for something that for a huge number of people didn't need it in the first place.
Absolutely.
And people lost their livelihoods when they said no. I mean, that's outrageous. Every week I feel more smug, and I feel like I'm the only person that didn't get a really bad tattoo.
A lot of people really kind of lost their sanity as well, didn't they? Or their kind of sense of living in a...
People.
Yeah.
I remember trying to discuss government overreach with a friend, and in the end, all the person could say was, well, it's best to be on the safe side. They couldn't even have the conversation. I'm furious about it still.
The harm principle.
Rightly so.
A divisive story in the Mail now, Cressida, another one. But I think perhaps most freelancers in comedy will have a singular view on this.
The sick note culture clampdown that's dividing Britain. Disabled people and their carers slam plans to replace monthly benefit payments with vouchers, but others say it will stop abuse of the system. So, Rishi apparently is proposing vouchers instead of PIP payments. What does it stand for? Can't remember. Personal independence payment. But what this article doesn't exactly say is what these vouchers are for. In some cases, it's to get changes made to your home. So if you've had some sort of disability where you need...
you get a rail or something.
Yeah, so fair enough.
Slip mat.
But I don't... when you read the headline, you think, they mean like fruit and veg vouchers and you're not allowed to spend it on fags. But it's not clear exactly.
Is there something... this is a more general point, but do you think there's something about a certain age when you just cannot keep up with the new disability and welfare payments of one kind or another? They just seem... I remember, job seekers allowance and things like that. They seem to be, from, 20 or 30 years ago, just a constantly evolving and mutating series of financial benefits. They say, the tax code just doubles in size every couple of years.
Yeah, no, the ever-evolving bureaucratic complexity of the benefit system. Yeah, no one's ever managed to simplify it. They've tried to with universal credit.
Yeah.
Maybe they've done it a little bit. It all depends, doesn't it? There's always anxiety and depression, things like that, taking people out of the workforce, which shouldn't do that. So as I've said, if you can't work with anxiety and depression, then I've got no hope. But
yeah, true.
But you just, you have to just work. Anyway,
that is true. Sorry, yeah.
No, it is. Tell me about it. Yeah. And you get no sympathy. I can tell you that as well. But there's a miner here, an ex-miner, 70 years old, disabled due to working his early life as a coal miner. That's the guy I want to pay. Yeah. That's absolutely valid. The guy's destroyed his body, working hard. He should get money.
Breathing in particulate matter.
Yes.
And,
yeah, the coal face. So absolutely. So it's a problem because some people deserve it. But if we don't do something, imagine the entire benefit system collapsing. Then you've got yourself an apocalyptic scenario. So you've got to reduce it rather than
when you
something
say
like
collapsing, you mean under its own weight?
Yeah, I mean...
Because somewhere in here they talk about
I always think that is the most plausible. When people talk about a failed state, when they talk about civilizations collapsing, what does it actually look like? And I think that would be it. I think in our present world, that would be how it collapses.
Yeah.
The welfare state.
I've heard people say that's how Rome went.
Yeah.
One of my
Bread and
dad's theories.
circuses, part two.
Yeah. Because fundamentally, you've got the ageing population and you've got the low birth rate, and that's the fundamental problem behind it. You have all these people more and more dependent. Maybe they are all legitimate claims, but how do we afford them all? Yeah. That's a big problem.
It is a mindset thing. You're absolutely right. People used to go to work with anxiety and depression, and they were often given powerful drugs like barbiturates and so on to get through them that were no good for them. It was terrible. There shouldn't be a return to that. But to swing too far the other way and just say you can stay home, it is... it's the slipperiest of slopes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. OK, good. We're all on the same side. How many days off have you had in the last 10 years, Nick, due to mental illness or anxiety? No, I haven't had a single. I think I've taken a single day off work for anything, and that was gout. First came, it was so...
You allowed days off for 19th century illnesses only. Generously 19th century, 17th century illnesses.
Handy checklist in the Mail now for which universities to send your kids to if you want them to benefit from a bit of cultural enrichment.
Yeah, it's a third of foreign students seeking to stay in the UK are at just 6 institutions, figures show, and they're not the most august institutions either. It's Study Group UK, which is just an education agency. Then it's Portsmouth, De Montfort, Hertfordshire, Coventry, and the Creative Arts University, whatever that is, University of Creative Arts. But they're saying it's not their fault because they're saying it's actually it's the government's policy which allows you to switch visa from your education visa to just asylum seeker, and then suddenly you're an asylum seeker, and so that's why more
you lose a Z, asylum seeker. That's part of a tree's irrigation infrastructure, I think. Asylum.
Showing off 158 IQ again. So
asylum seeker.
Well, anyway, that's the point. They're blaming the government. The government, well, I don't know if the government's blaming them, but the article's sort of semi-blaming them. And we've got this big problem. People come in for a visa. It's a scam just to stay in the country. Suella's phrase was pretty apt. She said too many universities are selling immigration, not education, and that is correct.
That is exactly the suspicion, isn't it? And I don't care whether it's individual universities or whether it's the system, but it's definitely, would you say?
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? I have some sympathy when they say, look, it's not us, Gov, it's the system. Fair enough. But then why are there so many at particular institutions?
Well, maybe, God knows, maybe it is because they tend to know that that's where their brother or cousin or someone they heard from went, you know. I mean, that's often why we are a target for immigration generally, isn't it?
Right.
Because there's family hooking up. But it is very often, you know, these things... it's like working in the Common Agricultural Policy or something. You know, you get a telegram telling you what to plant that year. And the same thing. Very few people are part of a real, you know, independent decision-making process, I think, process. I don't know. Nick, do you think there's a...
I don't know. I'm just worried this is going to get so much worse under Labour. They need to solve all this in, like, what, a couple of months?
Good luck.
It's like that moment when you wake up and you realise you haven't done your homework, isn't it, after 14 years. Times now, Cressida. I wonder if you could give us your aesthetically neutral take on this.
Calling women pretty at work is sex discrimination, judge rules. So this judge has ruled that suggesting a woman's look might help a business is not flattering and instead risks diminishing her. But what really happened is that somebody who worked with somebody who was an old family friend had a kind of slightly naff exchange of text messages, and this has now resulted in a legal thing. And I just fall on the side of, OK, maybe it's not great to text these things, but I think that this is a problem that, as far as possible, women should solve immediately and personally. And the moment you start getting the authorities involved, I just think, what is the long-term plan for this? Are you trying to make women unemployable?
Absolutely. And also, it will elevate that woman's status, A, in the eyes of the people that she works with, and also in her own mind. She thinks I'm somebody who can sort of say,
I personally would not want to employ that person.
No.
But... one thing is, I know the sexes are different, as we believe here, but if this happened to a man, it'd be amazing. We never get any compliments. 2, this lady has said she was humiliated and undermined. It's called work. That's the workplace. I get humiliated and undermined every day. By the way, also, not all women were treated like this. He had this relationship just with her, which proves it's not all women, right?
Yeah.
They were a very particular... They were friends, and this is blurring between... You know, my goodness me, in comedy, of course, everyone's... You know, this...
A lot of blurring.
This sort of stuff really shouldn't be taking up court time when we know it's got important asylum cases to get through. That's 3 down, 1 to go. In the final, traditionally left field section, we have XTV switching on, EU voices silenced, and why losing your keys might actually be a strategic manoeuvre on the part of your brain. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
A man who worked for Sainsbury's for 20 years was sacked because he didn't pay for a few bags for life. Niamke Dofu put his shopping through a self-service checkout after his night shift, and CCTV showed him choosing the 0 bags used option, and he was fired for gross misconduct. Well, join me now to discuss this. In our studio is the lawyer and broadcaster and great friend of the show, Andrew Eborn. Andrew, welcome to the studio.
Join you,
certainly is. Now, on the one hand,
yes,
he was caught banged to rights on CCTV. It looked like, and the tribunal agreed, he stole the bags, but a 20-year career dashed on the rocks over 60p?
Yeah, I mean, the headlines are horrendous, aren't they? You sort of turn around on that sort of basis. So basically, there must be a valid reason for dismissing an employee, and you have to follow due process and so on and so forth. So they can look at about capability or conduct. And there has to be appropriate procedures set in place under employment law to afford that sort of protection. What they say, however, if there's gross misconduct, you can be dismissed instantly. Now, gross misconduct includes criminal offence like theft. And the reality is, in the law, if you take property, whatever its value, with the intent of permanently depriving the person of it, then that is theft. And so what they did, they looked at the CCTV footage, and the Employment Tribunal had a look at this sort of stuff, and the guy wasn't just pressed no bags, he went backwards and forwards and so on and so forth. So he knew he was getting bags. And what they sort of turned in, I always sort of trust comes in on foot, but leaves on horseback. And so what Sainsbury's are saying in their defence is, hang about, we lost trust in the guy, even though 20 years and so on and so forth. We need to make sure we have trust in our employees.
Do you think they've thrown the book at him, thrown the bag at him, to make all of us worry about us being watched by CCTV? Is this fella a scapegoat?
Oh, I think without doubt it's a story and a warning for everybody.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday at midnight on GB News.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. So, exciting news for the final section. Elon Musk cressider in the Daily Mail. After space rockets and electric cars, he's now invented television.
Elon Musk has teased the long-anticipated launch of XTV after vowing to turn the site into an everything app which will be compatible with most smart devices. So I think he's trying to recreate YouTube, which is exciting, isn't it? Because does this mean it's the end of free speech? If Elon's holding the keys to YouTube, no one will get demonetised? Is that how it will work?
I don't know. I haven't really worked out how monetisation works. I think you've managed to get a few quid out of it.
$252 the other day.
Amazing.
So I obviously advocate X, but I don't know if I'm compromised now because I'm doing so well out of it.
I mean, you actually do get genuine... You don't farm engagement. I mean, it grows naturally on you. It's real, but I don't get much engagement, but...
it's all that stuff you say.
But, other people... But it has been a disaster for Twitter. A lot of accounts I used to like now just sort of go, what's your favourite film with a pig in it?
Taylor Swift, guys, yes or no? I know, and a farming engagement. It's awful. What do you notice about this clip? The fact that you're trying to get money off me, I think. But what I love about Musk, he had like a flickering TV logo. His logo, it looks like MTV in the 90s. Everything Musk does, he's a genius, but aesthetically, it's all rubbish. But I love it because he's trying to take us back to the 90s.
Max
Free
Headroom,
speech,
isn't he?
You know, kind of like, hey, guys, let's be colourblind, let's not be, like, bothered about race. In every way, and look at this rubbish graphic. He wants to go back to the 90s, and I love it.
It's absolutely true. And the 90s were the best decade. It's funny how we didn't realise... I think we kind of knew at the time. I did know it was good. I did know I was blessed. But, absolutely, I cannot imagine that I'm going to sit around in the evening watching anything to do with Twitter on a TV screen, though. I mean...
Oh, you will. You will, Simon. You will. Yeah, it'll be like Apple TV, but it'll be XTV. There'll be no other choice anyway, because Musk will shut everyone else down. A benign dictatorship of Musk.
OK. Well, there's lots of American Music Club videos, maybe. Staying with Twitter-adjacent news, Nick, this is woeful even by Mastodon standards in the Telegraph.
That was Mastodon that he said, by the way. It's perfectly allowed. So Brussels scraps privacy-friendly Twitter rival with just 18 active accounts. So the EU had this lame thing, EU Voice. And it was like, oh, we can do a sort of... It was based on the technology provided by Mastodon, like, hey, let's have our own Twitter. But it was rubbish, and no one cared because they're lame losers. It was based on PeerTube, which is an open-source technology.
PeerTube.
And it was 40...
so lame.
I know, 40... I know, that Mastodon was a thing for a while, wasn't it? Amongst the Remainer centrist stats, I'm just going to go to Mastodon. Guys, you can find my account on Mastodon.
Yeah.
And no one... It didn't take off because it was rubbish and boring.
They'll be here any minute now.
Yeah. 40 EU bodies and politicians have signed up for EU Voice, but only 18 of them were active because it's a rubbish idea that can't compete with the mighty Musk and his rubbish graphics.
Somebody worked this out. It's called network effect, I think. Is that right? It's a sort of scale thing. Geoffrey West wrote a whole book about it, fascinating, called Scale, about why, like, whales are more effective than insects and why cities have... You know, a city can be 10 times the population of a town, but have at least 100, if not 1,000 times as many interesting things to do that evening. These things scale, you know, the way that networks happen. Right. It's very interesting. But, I mean, you don't need to read the whole book to have known this was a disaster.
That makes... Yeah, this is like trying to say, my new nickname is... Everyone calls me it. No.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It has to...
Right, trying to give yourself... I mean, I did it with Big Dog for a bit, but yeah, giving yourself... Boris did it with his own nickname, Big Dog. That's why I copied that.
We have to move on. We're going to squeeze a couple more in. We've got encouraging news now for those of us of a certain age, Cressida, in the Telegraph.
Forgetting where your keys or wallet are does not mean you're losing your memory, scientists say. So apparently it just means that actually you need a bit more space for other important things.
Yeah.
It's just not important to you. You'd think where your keys were would be important to you, but...
It is important, and I'll tell you why, because it's infuriating when you can't find them and you get into a bad temper that can take quite a few minutes to clear even after you've found them, you know. I mean, I can spend whole afternoons, I've got a routine about it, but it is... I don't think the brain is making good decisions. What do you...
Well, isn't it unconscious competence? You know, like when you're driving, you don't need to think about it consciously anymore. Yeah. So that's why you don't know, in this case, where you put your... Although I suppose if it was competence, you'd find them. So maybe it's unconscious incompetence.
It is that thing. It's definitely... When you come in and you put your keys down, you're not thinking about where you put them down. It's not that you can't remember, it's that you're not paying attention when you put them down, which is why you need habits.
Gentlemen, can I introduce you to handbags? In the same way that you never lose your toothbrush because it only goes there.
Well, I don't lose stuff, but I'm just trying to relate to Simon. But it's the little... The only I don't lose the keys, the little AirPod case with your headphones. That's the one that gets me. It's usually, like,
I have one...
ears.
I can't carry a handbag, obviously, until we manage to do away with this trans business once and for all. That's what's annoying me about it, you know. But I have one enormously large kind of, you know, bum bag. Yeah, really? Yeah. But my wife says that looks more gay than a handbag. She's probably right about that. I don't know. But
for balance, I just want to say
you need something.
That's great, though.
Maybe a sporran.
Being gay, obviously.
Can you put a sporran with it? Anyway, that's all we've had time for.
Show, amazing.
Sadly, no time to look at the mental capacity of the T-Rex and whether he used to lose his keys all the time. The show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Tuesday's front pages. Daily Mail, all schools warned on sextortion epidemic. Telegraph, sex is a biological fact, NHS declares. Guardian, Yousaf quits as First Minister after coalition gamble triggers SNP crisis. The Times, SNP lurches into another crisis as its leader quits. iNews, PIP disability benefit could be cut using new system with 6 tiers. And finally, the Daily Star, creepy Jez will kill 18 billion slugs. Those were your front pages. That's all we have time for. My thanks to my guests, Cressida Wetton and Nick Dixon, on this glorious evening. We are Yusuf Free. I'm back tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Leo Kirst and Stephen Allen. If you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, thank you for your time and good night.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Good evening to you. Tomorrow, more wet weather to come in parts of the west, whereas in the east, it'll start to feel fairly warm in the late April sunshine. Low pressure is still dominating, but it's kind of slow moving, and it's in these western areas where we've seen outbreaks of rain today that we will again see them tomorrow. Staying fairly damp overnight across South Wales, southwest England. The rain easing a little across parts of Scotland. The heavy showers also easing in Northern Ireland, at least for a time. Staying largely clear across East Anglia and the southeast. Temperature-wise, a bit warmer than recent nights. Most urban areas, at least, staying up at 7 to 10 degrees Celsius. on to Tuesday, and as I said, it's a bit of an east-west split. We'll start with a lot of cloud across northern England, but I'm hopeful it'll brighten up here. There will be further rain for Wales and Northern Ireland, some heavy rain as well, the yellows and the reds in there, and it's also fairly wet for parts of southwest England. Pretty gusty in these western areas as well. A few showers in western Scotland, but a good part of Scotland dry. Much of northern England, the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast having a fine old day, and it will feel a bit warmer as well. Look at those temperatures, 17, 18, maybe even 19 Celsius, but still on the cool side where we've got the cloud and the breeze and the outbreaks of rain further west from that area of low pressure. That does pull away, allowing some warmer weather to move in over the next few days, but it is not going to be dry everywhere. There will still be some heavy rain around.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh, dear.
Oh, my God. Are you joking?
You're joking. Really? Seriously? It's not a wine. What is it?
Oh, my God. This is amazing. Thank you.
The next winning call could be answered by you for a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash.